All right, today is May 2, 2024. This is the meeting of the Kubernetes Storage Special Interest Group. As a reminder, this meeting is public, recorded, and posted on YouTube. On the agenda today, we're going to do 131 planning. So we finished up 130 cycle last time, and this time we're going to go over the items that we want to commit to for the 131 release. The preliminary dates for the 131 release have come out. The production freeze is going to be the 6th of May, enhancement freeze on the 13th, 6th of June, enhancement freeze on the 13th of June, code freeze on the 9th of July, and then the release goes out on the 13th of August. So what we want to do this cycle for this meeting is figure out what items we want to commit to as a SIG. Thank you. I believe it was probably Xing who copied over to 131. We can review these items and figure out if there's anything that we need to remove, add, modify. Please feel free to speak up. So let me start going through these and we can decide which ones we're going to commit to. So for the first one, we have recovering from resize failure. In 130, it stayed as alpha. API changes were merged in 128. For 131, so now I think there was no status update on this for a while.
Nothing really happened, and I am not sure we in Red Hat can commit to 131. So I don't know. If there is any other volunteer, that would be helpful.
Got it. So this is also a good opportunity for folks who are looking for ways to jump in and contribute. We will need volunteers for some of these items, and if you're interested, we can connect you with the right developers to get started. I'm going to say for 131, it's the same goal, and for now, what we're going to do is mark it as needs volunteers. All right, thank you, Jan. Next is the volume group API. Any update on this one and what we want to do in 131?
So we're going to stay in alpha. We'll fix some bugs in the APIs right now.
Got it. Cool, thank you, Xing. Next, provision volumes from cross namespace and cross namespace snapshots in PVC. This was supposed to continue design work for the last release. And I think they were blocked on the reference grant API. So I think we'll continue work on this unless anybody has additional information. Okay. Next is CSI volume health, additional metrics under events. This was remaining in alpha last cycle, and we didn't get too many updates here. Do we need to ask for a volunteer here?
So I have found someone who is interested in helping with the E2E test. So we'll see. So we have like over a month, right, for the app freeze. So we'll see if we can get E2E test in before that. So I will check with the person and then see whether we can try to target data. So basically depends on when we can get the E2E testing.
Got it. Okay. So hopefully we can get at least the E2E testing and maybe we can get beta as well.
Yeah.
Cool. So for now, I'll leave it as alpha and
Okay.
we can update as needed. Next is change block tracking, which was started last cycle. The CSI changes were merged. So I think let's continue down that path and update the Kubernetes side and get the new CSI release out. So continue 31. All right, next up is enable privileged containers for Windows to replace CSI proxy. This was designed last cycle, and
Yeah, sorry, I was just going to say that we made some changes to the EBS CSR driver to support this capability. I think Eddie can provide a more detailed update, but we're trying to see if we can move this feature to beta in 131.
got it. Okay.
Yeah, hey everyone. So we have an update. The EBS CSI driver node plugin now supports running as a host process container on Windows. So for next steps here, I've been talking with Mauricio, and the next steps here is to graduate proxy v2 lib to beta. So right now I saw that the GCP PR that utilizes the library has been revived. And he's also engaging with Azure folks to see if they can port over their implementation to use proxy v2. They're not really keen on it. So Mauricio did say that he might evaluate the graduation criteria. But yeah, that's the current status of that.
Got it. Okay. Cool. That is great progress. Let me go ahead and mark this as, so this was designed previously. Do we want to mark it as alpha for now?
Yes, I think that'd be a good idea.
Perfect. Okay, so we'll track it as alpha for 131. Sounds like we have good progress here. Thank you, Eddie. Thank you, Manu. Next up, let's see. So this item was dropped last cycle, SE Linux relabeling using mount options. Is this something that we want to pick back up?
Currently, it looks like not, because I'm still waiting for some data from our customers,
Okay.
but I may reconsider.
Okay, so I'll leave it crossed out.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
they may reconsider the 131. Cool, thank you, Jan. And the related one here, is it the same story or different access modes other than RWOP?
That's the same.
Got it. Okay. And I guess this would be going to beta. And I'm going to mark this as not started and then cross it out. And if we want to pick it up, we can update this. Okay. CSI migration for vSphere. Removing the entry vSphere. What was the status of this one? This was already removed in 129. Do we still need to track this?
I don't think so. I think everything is removed.
Okay, and same thing for Azure file?
Yes, because the whole cloud provider is gone.
Perfect. Okay, go ahead and remove those two. Next item is always on a reclaim policy. Believe this was going to beta last cycle, and status update was Patrick has a PR to make it easier to test in alpha. And yeah, it looks like it was in progress. So I think we should keep this for 131. Target
Yeah,
beta.
so yeah, we can target beta because I think we are making good progress on the E2 test. Thanks to Patrick and Clary for helping with E2 tests.
Perfect. Thank you, Patrick and Carlery. All right, thanks for that update, Shing. Next is volume attribute class, staying in alpha in 130. For 131, any changes we want to make here?
So I don't know if we'll 100% be able to do it, but ideally we'd like to graduate it to beta if we can meet the criteria.
Perfect. Okay.
I've seen there's an update from Clary in the chat.
Yeah, on a related note, Connor, I think you have a PR out for a while run now, right? Which adds the end-to-end tests for this. We would like to get that merged in soon. It's been like 4 or 5 weeks at least. So
Yeah, I think I can find the PR in a moment. I have an open PR for the happy path end-to-end test for the volume attributes class feature.
I just
which is
pasted
part
the
of
link in the chat window for
there
that.
you go. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, folks. So we'll target beta.
Yeah, I know this quota thing's waiting on the SIG API machinery feedback, so we'll see if we make it in time or not, but
Got it.
that'd be the ideal target.
Okay, keep us updated. Next is robust volume manager reconstruction. This was completed, so I think we're done here. I'm going to go ahead and remove this one.
Yes.
Okay. Next is PV last transition time, consider GA in 131.
So we would like to move it to GA.
Okay.
I talked to Roman. We should be able to do that.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and mark this as GA and this beta. Start. And we will cross this out. Perfect. Thank you, Jan, for that update. Next is storage capacity scoring, which was designed last cycle. And it looks like there was a cap, but it kind of got stuck. So hopefully we can get the cap updated and finish this cycle. Do you want to keep the goal as designed this cycle or target alpha?
I think the tab owner is pinging Michelle for reviews, but I'm not
Got it.
the response.
Okay, so let's target design for this cycle and we can get that reviewed and merged. All right, next is volume expansion for stateful sets. This was dropped last cycle. We were looking for volunteers. We didn't find any volunteers. Anybody interested in picking this one up?
I think that one is on SIG apps, and we are doing just reviews.
They're just doing reviews?
Yeah.
Do we have owner? I thought the original owner is not active anymore, right? That's the
Yeah,
last I remembered.
That was the problem. And the owner was from SIG apps.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, would anybody be interested in helping drive this from our side?
Do we have any document or something which talks about what this is about and what we are trying to accomplish?
There is an open cap with many, many comments. It got stuck on the error cases because they are hard.
And hasn't this been undesigned for like 10 releases or more?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of history.
Got it.
I'll uncross this out and we'll just ask for volunteers. Nobody needs to speak up now, but it's a candidate. If we don't get a volunteer in a couple of meetings, we can go ahead and remove it from this release. Next one is SIG node non-graceful shutdown tests. There were bug fixes happening, I believe, last cycle.
I mean, still, it's basically there was a test there. It's just there were some failures, and Artificial said he's taking a look. But looks like it's still have those failures. It's not fixed. So
Got it. Okay, so we will keep it as bug fixes and track that for 131. Next is SIG apps auto delete PVCs with stateful sets. This was supposed to go to GA, and I don't think we got any update on this one. Let's mark it as a candidate for GA in 131. Let's say we need volunteers. Okay. Next is add option to disable 6-minute force detach timer. This was a bug fix level or being tracked at that level. Doc PR is merged. How to enable flag by default. Do we have Ben? Ben, do you have any updates on the?
Yeah, I have Rohit in the room with me.
Ah, perfect.
Yeah, I think we checked in everything that needed to be checked in. It's in 1.30. I don't think there's any interest in backporting this. So I think that's going to be the extent of it.
So it sounds like
Yeah.
it was already completed in 1.30. So we should make sure that's updated correctly.
The remaining future work would be to change the default from false to true and eventually deprecate the option entirely.
And is that something we want to do in 131 or wait for a subsequent release?
Well, how does the group feel about doing this in just one release? So we have the new
I
option.
think generally we try to wait a release and see how things go and then flip the defaults. But I can be
so
convinced.
we would want to leave it default false for all of 131 and then look at in 132 changing the default if nothing blows up.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion.
Okay, well then we should have a tracking item to remind us that to keep an eye on this, and then in 132 to change the default.
Sounds good. So I'll go ahead and cross it out for this release and then say that for 132, this becomes our tracker. Okay. Mark this as not started. Next is Cozy moving to V1 Alpha 2. Did this end up landing in
oh, so it has been in design, right? So so initially Code team is thinking about moving this to beta, but then there are some new requests coming. We'll need to make some changes to the API itself. So I don't think we can go directly to beta anymore. So that's why this one
continue to
becomes
target V1 Alpha 2 for this cycle?
right.
Got it. Okay, that seems reasonable. So we'll track this for 131. All right, thank you, Xing. Next is the all-in-one CSI sidecar effort. Was designed last cycle. There's been, sounds like a few meetings happening here. Any update, any new target for 131?
Connor has been working with Mauricio on this. I don't think we have any changes in terms of the current status. We'll probably still continue to work on making this. Connor, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, we had a meeting today. We've been working on a POC. This isn't going to go to alpha in 131 like it's a long-term project. We definitely aren't going to have anything ready for release. But yeah, we'd like to eventually get our POC up to the standard to present in this meeting sometime in, a few months from now or something like that.
That makes sense. Okay. So we will keep it in design for this cycle, and thank you for the work on that, Connor. Next is volume populator data source, add metric support and testing for out of tree. It was supposed to go to GA last cycle, but I think we pushed it out to 131. Requirement for GA was some actual volume populators are implemented and in use. OpenEBS and KubeVirt both have implementation. Biggest gap is storage vendors who want to implement vendor-specific features using volume populators. So I guess, do we want to revisit this one, volume populator data source being GA'd?
I think last time Michelle said someone in her team might be interested in bringing this to GA. So I need to check with her.
But no one has a plan to do like proprietary data sources, right? That's still off the table.
Proprietary data source. Well, we are actually interested. We are looking at this.
I mean, I remember,
What do you mean
when I was at
proprietary
NetApp,
data
there was a
sources?
lot of interest in this. But
There are, I think, there are some implementations of this, right?
but how do they work?
What do you mean a proprietary? What do we need a proprietary?
So in particular, a data source that's implemented by the CSI driver. Like that, we cannot do based on the current design, and that's always made it less useful for certain applications.
Okay, I actually don't know what is that.
All right. Well, we don't need to worry about it here.
Okay.
So I think what we say is we need volunteers, and if we get a volunteer, we can chase up the criteria for getting this to GA. I'm gonna uncross it out and see if we can get some volunteers for this one. Okay, the next set are CSI migration code that needs to be removed. So this was stuff that was deprecated and is now ready for removal in 131, Ceph RBD, Ceph FS, and Portworx. Okay.
I think Color already sent a PR about Ceph RBD removal.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, so this might be fairly quick. And you said that was who was that?
Kalari for I think he has a PR for the Ceph RBD one removal.
Got it. Okay, I'll put his name here. Okay, and in the past it was done by Humble, so if he wants to help with either of these, hopefully he jumps in.
Oh, the last one is not removal. The last one is the Portworx. They are actually
Oh, it's beta on by default.
they're
Okay.
moving CSI migration to
Got it.
beta. Yeah, so Luis actually is working on that. So we can change the name tablet to Luis.
Got it. Okay, so okay, so mark that as beta for 131. Cool. All right, anything else we want to add for the 131 release?
Hello. I and a new KP. Want it in this release.
Is it this
Thanks.
one?
Yes.
Got it. So let me pull that up. Entry volume plugin, remove dynamic provisioning support. Can you give a quick summary about what this is?
Sorry, my English is not very good. 然后I sent the message in the issue. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, no problem. Anybody else on the call have any background on this one? I'll go ahead and add it to our sheet for tracking.
Is this just part of the migration away from dynamic provisioning volumes so that everything is CSI based? Is that the thinking behind this?
Yes.
The host path. Okay. Well, why the host path in particular? Like host path driver doesn't do provisioning, does it? It just gives you access to a host path. It can't create new volume. I mean, it can't create persistent volumes. Or is this like the CSI host path fake driver? I'm confused.
For the hot path, 然后 it's just remove the support.
You're talking about the in-tree host path? That's what you
Yes.
in-tree host path remove dynamic. Okay.
So I think this will be worthwhile for the leads to review offline and see if this makes sense.
Yeah, it's the first I've seen it.
All right, thanks for raising, Carlery. So leads will review. Offline, okay, target. 131. All right, cool. Thank you for sharing that. Next up, we have Rohit on stateful format tracking. Actually, before we get to that, do we want to put that in to track here in our 131 release?
This particular item. Let's talk about it and see what the level of interest is.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm going to stop sharing and I will hand it off to the two of you, Ben and Rohit. Which one of you is going to present? I'll make you host.
Do you want me to present? I have to join the meeting.
Do you want me to present that doc in particular?
Yeah, I think so.
All right, it's going to take me a sec to find the doc.
No problem.
But just as background for this item.
Or I could maybe I can share, and then we can use that yours as a video camera.
Okay. Rohit's going to join the meeting silently and share, and I'll just sort of give some background while he's doing that, if that works.
Sounds good. So I'll make you a co-host right now, so you will be able to.
Make Rohit co-host after he joins.
Oh, okay.
He's gonna share.
Sounds
good. Did you send me the meeting details?
It's in the agenda doc. Click on the agenda doc. It's in your chat. The DM. I sent you the agenda doc.
Oh, you sent it in a DM.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the Zoom link is in that agenda doc.
Okay.
So sorry. So the issue that we're struggling with is CSI doesn't actually say anything anywhere in the spec about makeFS or formatting file systems. Everyone just knows that if you're implementing a file system on block CSI plugin, like it's something you implicitly have to do somewhere before the workload gets a hold of the volume, right? We all do this. The problem.
This meeting is being recorded.
The problem that we've run into is I know we have an audio loop. Can you mute us?
I did not intend to join the audio.
Oh, okay. The problem is some file systems are large. It's possible to fail in the middle of a format. It's possible to have the machine power cycle in the middle of a format. There's all kinds of reasons you can end up with a half formatted volume. And the CSI spec basically says you just have to deal with this, right? If you get a call at a node stage volume, node publish volume, and the volume is half formatted, you have to figure that out and fix it. And that's really, really hard in practice to do reliably, because if you get it wrong in either direction, the consequences are dire, right? If it's not fully formatted and you don't finish the format and start writing data to the volume, you'll inevitably get data corruption because the file system is already corrupted. If it actually was already formatted and you conclude that it isn't and you reformat it, you could end up deleting user data. And so to reliably solve this problem, you need to explicitly track somewhere, like, did the format complete? And it's possible to do this entirely inside the CSI plugin, but all the implementations that we've been able to discover are super gross for one reason or other. And because this is a problem that really everyone needs to solve, we thought we should propose a standard CSI way of actually tracking whether the volume is formatted or not, that allows us to more safely handle this case of, something bad happened in the middle of a format, and now you have to recover from that situation. Is that a good background?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So are you able to share? Your co-host, but nothing's being shared yet.
Yep, I was waiting.
Oh.
Okay, so I think, yeah, we have 2 versions of this document. I think version 2 is mostly complete, so we could probably just take a look at this. So I think what we're proposing is that we're going to add a new format state field to the PD and the volume snapshot contents. And this field can be in one of 3 states. It could be either in format unknown, format requested, or format done. And the intention is to put these fields in a location where either the CSI sidecars, namely the CSI provisioner or the CSI snapshot or kubelet, can actually manipulate these things, but they're largely hidden to the CSI driver and the node plugins. And in order to make sure that this works in as many cases as possible, but never results in a regression or a state that is worse than what we have today, we, I think, always try to actively fall back to the format unknown state. If, for instance, a CSI sidecar doesn't support it, or kubelet doesn't support it, or a node driver or a controller doesn't support it,
Or you have some old volume.
Yeah, we just always fall back just to be safe. So that's the high level approach. So we think that we're going to have to modify the following set of gRPCs by adding a payload. And specifically, I think we're still thinking through this, but it's possible that we don't need to modify create snapshot response, but we only have to change the handler for create snapshot response. We're still trying to work through some of this internally. So create volume request will kick off this new game by optionally setting the format state to format requested if it in fact supports this feature. It's possible, though, if it doesn't, it'll just default to format unknown, and you're once again in the same state that you are today. But
and it's also possible that if it's the creation of a clone snapshot or volume that's already formatted, create volume could return format done.
Yeah. So by default, if it supports a feature, it goes into format requested. But if ever cloning a volume or creating a volume from a pre-existing PV, creating a PV from a pre-existing snapshot contents, it will always copy the format state from whatever its source is. And so if it is format done, it'll stay format done. If it's format requested, it'll stay format requested. And if it's actually unknown because it's some older source, it'll just stay in that state. And from there on out, for example, in create volume response, if the CSI driver supports this feature and it believes that the volume that it's producing is fully formatted and consumable from the time that it actually produces it, it will actually set the state to format done. Otherwise, it will set the state to format requested, which indicates that node stage volume or node publish volume should go through and do the work of actually formatting the volume. And so this field is then stamped on the PV, and then this informs the behavior that kubelet and the node plugin then go down. So,
so the state will get passed into node stage volume and node publish volume respectively.
Right.
As an input.
Yeah.
By kubelet.
And then basically at that point, they basically ping pong the state back and forth, and everyone checks for like a state mutation. So as an example, kubelet sees that it has a certain state that it got with the PV. It sets the state on its gRPC request, and it checks to see whether the response came back the same. And if it recognizes a feature and it gets a state transition, it then stamps that state transition onto the PV.
Yeah, so the PV will have a field that reflects what...
It's like the consensus in between the two.
Yeah, what Kubernetes and the CSI node plugin say this format state of the volume is.
Right.
And crucially, that lets you know, like, if you got all the way to the end of the node publish volume and it succeeded, like, then it was definitely formatted by that point, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if anything goes wrong before then and you have to come back and retry, you'll know that you never got to the end before. So it's, if you see some garbage in the volume, it's the result of a previous unsuccessful format, and you can start over and format again safely.
Yeah.
So then,
you're not in that state, you can, turn it over to the admin. Maybe the admin can try to recover data or something.
So Ben, you're saying if the retries happens, who's making the decision to format it again? If there's it's the driver who needs to check.
Well, the idea is the PV will have a flag that will track what the consensus state is. And so if you've never successfully gotten to the end of a node publish before and marked it as formatted, you'll know that you never got to that point before, and that'll be an input to the retry of the node stage volume. So when node stage volume gets retried, it might look at the actual volume and see what looks like a super block, but it will have an additional bit of data, which is, according to kubelet, the format never succeeded. And that'll be a really valuable hint so that you can go reformat it in case that prior super block was, a half successful format or a failed format or whatever.
Did that make sense? Or
okay, so basically it could still be, I was just thinking, it sounds like it could still be in this like half formatted situation, you go format it again, right?
Yeah. And eventually, assuming you don't have any failures, it'll get fully formatted, and then the CSI plugin will return to kubelet. It is fully formatted, and kubelet will stamp that on the PV before handing the volume over to a workload where the workload can start writing data on it. So at that point, like, the format was successfully done, and now you better not format it again, because a workload has started writing data and a format would be destructive at that point. But as long as you've never gotten to the point where a workload had access to the volume, there couldn't possibly be any real data on the volume, and it's safe to wipe it and start over, right?
Yeah. I think it's valuable to add some context as to when we're hitting scenarios like this. Like, so sometimes we have like network blips, or we have some transient issue with like, multipath is in a funky state or something like that. And so we have like node stage volume, like finish 90% of its work, get interrupted, and then come back and then see something that it's not expecting to see, right? And it's very hard to code for each and every single one of those error cases. It's much more cleaner to essentially definitively tell node stage volume that, hey, you can just go ahead and wipe this thing with impunity, because we can guarantee that no one has ever written anything to this, right? At that point, the mechanism becomes much more reliable and consistent. Did that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Cool. So I think the key thing to point out here is that in some drivers, node stage volume might actually finish doing the formatting, but in other drivers, it might be node publish volume.
Yeah.
So either one of them can actually set the final state to format done.
Yeah.
And so we came up with a rough truth table here as to what the inputs for node stage volume are and what the outputs will be. I think Ben and I were talking about a proposal where we actually look at the capabilities of the plugin and the capabilities of like the controller, and we can probably simplify this truth table a little bit. And node publish volume has a very similar truth table, except it is not possible to go from format requested and get format requested, and then that if everyone is playing the game, then you should never end up in this state. I think this is the major difference.
Yeah, because by the time node publish volume is done, it must be formatted.
Yeah.
Right? You can't hand over an unformatted volume to a workload.
Yeah. And then the key thing that we also wanted to point out is that we would like the mutation for whoever is setting the state to format done to be synchronous with the handling of like node publish volume or node stage volume. So like if you are ever setting the state to format done, you do it in a way such that the state is toggled before the workload, before the pod itself is allowed to come online. So, and then the last thing I think to discuss are snapshots. So as a part of create snapshot response, it makes sense to take the PD, to take the format state that's present in the PD, if the sidecar supports this feature, and then copy over this state from the PD into the snapshot contents.
Sorry, why do we need this?
Well, because it's possible to take a snapshot of an unformatted volume, and you need, when that snapshot eventually gets cloned, you need to know that you still need to format that volume. Whereas if the snapshot was taken of a formatted volume, then
you're losing data.
you better not format it.
Yeah.
So we need to propagate the state all the way back around to the new volumes that get cloned from that snapshot. Similarly, direct clones of volumes have the same issue, right? If we introduce this bit that signals to the node plugin whether it should format or not, it must always be accurate. Because if node plugins rely on it and it's inaccurate, you will destroy data. So we have to think through all the cases where volumes can start out formatted and make sure that we accurately capture when that is true and when that is not true.
Cool. I think the last thing to point out were the risks. I think in general, we try to mitigate all the risks by having everything fall back to format unknown, which should be today's behavior. So if anything, for instance, does not play this game, like the sidecar, the snapshotter sidecar, or the provisioner sidecar, or kubelet, or the controller, or the node plugin, then we always fall back to format unknown. So that should be safe in every single case. All of the drivers that exist today should have exactly the same behavior, which is no worse than what we have today.
Yeah, because right now you're permanently in the state of format unknown.
Yeah.
and you have to figure it out.
Yes, you have to figure it out, and that is not a great process. But hopefully, eventually, at some point in the future, everyone is either format requested and format done, and then they play this nice game and they have this nice synchronization, and they're able to cleanly handle all these states in a reliable way. One thing we do need to point out, though, is that if the PD is compromised and the format state is overwritten from format requested to format done, then on a subsequent mount of the PD, you're basically requesting the PD be reformatted.
You got that backwards. If it was done, you change it back to requested.
Oh, yeah, I actually wrote it.
You wrote it backwards. Yeah. So it's just, this field has to be protected from malicious mutation, just like a lot of things.
Yes. But I think there are a lot of CRs that could get like hijacked as well, which would result in all sorts of.
Yeah, anyone who can modify a PV can do worse things than this. So.
So I guess it makes sense to go through the alternatives. Do you want to describe the alternatives that we talked about?
Well, yeah. I mean, I wanted to ask right now if there's any questions or any comments before we have any more discussion.
Or any general feedback as well.
Yeah. Does anyone think this is like a terrible idea, or does this raise anyone's blood pressure? Or is there a feeling that, like, has anyone else hit this issue before and has concerns about it?
Hey, so this is Dave from the OpenEBS team. I was wondering, like, how common you get this issue. Like, I've like, created millions of file systems, and never have I ever had a file system. I wouldn't say never, but mostly never. They're mostly 99.999% succeed. So it seems like you're designing for a situation that is kind of rare.
That's definitely true. I would say that the frequency of this is like the cross product of scale and flakiness.
Yeah.
If you have a lot of scale and a lot of flakiness, like this does happen.
I could understand if node fails during a file system create. That for sure could happen, and at scale that's definitely going to happen.
Yeah. It might be a 1 in a million thing, but like if you're creating millions of volumes, this will happen with some regularity.
Right.
And we've seen it often enough to be an annoyance.
Yeah, I don't think, like, at least for our test beds, we don't necessarily have a super high scale, but we maybe we have a sufficient level of flakiness. But we do hit this very frequently. We also have a somewhat complex stack in that we have various components such as multipath, such as Lux.
Yeah, you're saying that if the multipath driver is in a weird state, then of course you can't get to the path to the volume, and stuff can go wrong easily.
Right.
Yeah, and the combination of Lux means that, like, formatting a volume actually consists of 2 layers of formatting. You have to first Lux format it, and then process them on top of Lux.
Yeah.
That takes more time. The window for things to go wrong is bigger.
Right.
It's also we're hitting this a lot in general with Lux. I think Lux is more complicated.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that was just my question.
Okay. Yeah. So I totally believe that, yeah, if you have a reliable enough platform and a low enough scale, like, it's safe to just say, I'm going to ignore this problem because it's 1 in a million. Call an admin. It does happen, and an admin can sort it out.
Yeah.
That's what a lot of people do, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think so. We hit this probably 3 or 4 times just this year, and again, it hasn't been a super high volume or super high scale. In a lot of cases, we've identified individual bugs. We tried to fix them so that our format detection is more deterministic. But again, it's all guesswork, right? It's all trying to look at the state of what is there and figure out.
Yeah, the fundamental problem is after it happens, reliably determining what state you're in is an impossibly difficult problem. So
that is nasty. That is where the admin has to do the work.
Yeah.
Another question I have: there's no file system specific logic in the state setter, right?
No. So basically, the node plugin gets to decide when the format is finished. So it could, in theory, want to layer ext4 on top of ext4 on top of XFS.
Yeah.
And that might be its criteria for success, and that's up to it.
Yeah. So the proposal is agnostic to what format it means. It just says, we're assuming that it doesn't matter how far you got. If you didn't get done, you can always go back to the beginning and restart, right? Because there would be no user data on it unless you had gotten completely done.
Yeah. So whatever was doing the format initiated the format command, you got to wait for that to return back saying success.
Yes,
that's correct.
Yeah, that's cool. And you don't care what the file system is, as long as something came back and said, yeah, I was successful.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And to be clear, there are certain types of PVCs where this just doesn't matter. Like raw block PVCs don't get formatted.
Raw block actually, I told this to Saad
Oh.
yesterday that raw block doesn't matter.
Oh.
And then immediately after my meeting with Saad, I was like, oh man, we put Lux on top of Saad, a raw block.
That's true. Okay. So
yeah.
So I just lied. But for things like NFS or a
Yeah.
Samba volume,
Yes.
there's no format work to be done because the file system is on some other system. So there, there's cases where this will be a no op, but wherever it's an op, we want to track that it happened. Any other questions, or want me to talk about the alternatives and stuff? All right, no other questions. So it is possible to solve this entirely inside the CSI plugin. So like one idea we had was you could just shift over the whole file system by one block and then basically reserve a block in the underlying device to like track this metadata inside the volume. That would actually work pretty reliably, but it's a little weird for one thing to like have to shift the file system over a block and put some metadata in front of it. And also like there's no real upgrade path for any existing data that is already formatted to work that way. Because you can't just like take existing volumes and shift them over by one block. So that and it also, even if that was like a reliable approach, every CSI driver that implements file system on block would have to re-implement that.
Yeah, I was just thinking that's that problem. I do not want to deal with that problem.
Yeah. It's nasty. It's also possible to rely on the controller plugin's stateful data storage and have the node plugin and the controller plugin communicate and track this information internal to the CSI plugin. The main downside to that approach is having node plugins contact controller plugins involves communication that is very hard to secure and make safe because it's a client on the worker node talking to a server on a control node, and getting that authentication to occur in a way that can't be exploited by attackers is pretty challenging. And so we don't favor back channel type approaches for security reasons. It's better to have this explicitly represented in the Kubernetes API. Then we can rely on Kubernetes security mechanisms to secure that information. So
yeah, I actually agree with that. That's a very strong rationale.
Yeah. So we were for both of those reasons we thought we should just try to solve this in Kubernetes. Like Rohit said, we're still working through some of the fine details and making sure that every corner case doesn't result in something bad happening. But our hope is that we can come up with a proposal first as a CSI spec change, get that ratified into the CSI spec, and then come through and propose a bunch of changes to Kubernetes APIs, kubelet, and various sidecars to make this actually work. And as you can see in the doc, it's several messages would get updated. I mean, it's all just like one field in each one of those, but the field has to sort of track all the way from crate volume back around to crate snapshot back around to crate volume, so that you really know for any volume whether it's formatted or not.
Yeah, you have to close the loop.
Yeah. So yeah, that's we just wanted to sort of float the idea out there, let you throw darts at it if you want, and we'll proceed with the proposal through the CSI community, probably. That's it. Saad?
Awesome. Thanks a lot, Ben and Rohit. And thanks, folks, for the questions and comments. So yeah, next steps here, it sounds like Ben will work with the CSI side of things to start making the requisite CSI changes. And Ben and Rohit, in parallel, you can probably get started on a KEP on the Kubernetes side. So if we get that approved, then that'll be a good signal to get the CSI changes merged. We can move on to the next item. This is from Balaji. Question on behalf of SRC. Is there any concern restricting Git repo volume creation as part of baseline restricted pod security standard? Balaji, are you on the line to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Oh, cool. Thanks. So I'm from SRC team, and we have had like couple of low CVEs on our SRC bucket as of now for Git repo volumes. And in the past, we discussed with the SIG storage folks on actually like removing the Git repo volume completely. But then what we heard is like there are a lot of users using it, so it may not be feasible to remove it. So we wanted to like ask like if is it okay if we add the Git repo volume creation restricted as part of the baseline or restricted? Because like whenever we get these low CVEs for Git repo volumes, we point them to our the Git repo volume page, and in that page we recently added a blob saying like how can users restrict the Git repo volumes using validating admission policies, and we gave an example too. But then still like the reporters wanted to like find a way to restrict the volume usage completely across all namespaces instead of like running some validation webhooks. So yeah, so we had this idea of like, okay, well, what is your take on like adding the volume restrictions to this baseline unrestricted PSPs or like the pod security standards?
What would it mean in terms of backwards compatibility for somebody that was using this volume?
Yeah, so this is going to like just prevent the new ones, so not the existing ones. For the existing ones, yeah, that still remains on them to go and clean up those pods.
Got it. And what would happen to the new ones that are created? What would the flow look like?
Yeah, so say you enable the at your namespace level, say you enable like the baseline or restricted pod security standards, then the pod creation would fail if you're using Git repo volume. And even in the pod security standards, like you can keep the versions. So either if you're using latest version or like the versions that wherever we added support, only then it will break. But if you're using a specific version that is already available, then it will not break your workloads.
And what would the default be? So I guess the default would basically flip it to it
Yeah.
will fail by default, and then you have to go
Yeah.
in and modify it.
Yeah, enable by default for the newer versions of pod security standards.
Got it.
Yes, this is basically like even though we did like year back we sent an email to all the folks saying, hey, like the Git repo volume is deprecated. Right way to use it is like have an init container that performs the Git clone operation. But we still like keep getting these like every 2-3 months once, and we wanted to figure out if there's any other better way.
Do other folks on the call have thoughts, comments? Yeah, I think from a security point of view, it makes sense. There is definitely a concern about backwards compatibility and possibly breaking, since this would effectively be a breaking change, right?
Yeah. So for example, if they are using the version latest in the pod security standards, then yes.
I think in the past we've made a very handful of select changes. I think one was with, for example, host path being read-only or something like that, where it was effectively a backwards compatibility breaking change, but we believe that the security benefits were worth it.
Yeah.
I think start an email thread with this group.
Yeah.
And include the security folks as well.
Yeah.
I think it'll be good to like have a robust discussion about if this kind of meets the bar for breaking that backwards compatibility.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. Yeah, so I'll also like going to talk with the SIG API missionary too and then I'll start the email thread with all of us.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Balaji.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Any other questions, comments, concerns? All right, thanks a lot, folks. We'll end it today.